Hello everyone, this is part 34 of What If Naruto Was Adopted by Kakashi, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
It had been a couple of days in the hospital and Kakashi wanted to get out. His son had shown up every day, which was nice. Plus Naruto brought him some books to read which helped to pass the time as well. The only problem was that he couldn't focus on the books for long because his mind kept going back to a few days ago and to what Anko said to him. She hadn't even shown up yet, most likely avoiding him for the time being. You can't just drop a bomb like that and leave, but she had anyway, and so here he was, his mind going back to that moment as he thought about his relationship with her. He thought back to when they had first met all those years ago. She had been this strange teenage girl with a chip on her shoulder for good reason. That time he was still in ABNU and he went on that mission with her and a few others because she thought she remembered something about Orochimaru. It had turned out to be a dead end, but on that mission he had gotten to know her. Over the years she had become a bigger part of his life, becoming part of his core group of friends and a surrogate aunt for Naruto as well. Then things had changed and she went to an old friend to him, seeing her as a woman, someone attractive, sexy and playful. Someone he liked having in his life. She added spice to a dull day and he felt like he could be open with her. He could let his guard down and he noticed the same with her. Then there was the sex life, which was great, so that was a nice bonus. He thought about when Naruto had been gone off with Jiraiya and the team. She had practically lived at his place. She still had a toothbrush and some spare clothing at his place. They had basically been living together at times and neither one of them had even once thought about it. It just seemed kind of natural. Yeah, it hadn't been perfect, of course. There had been times she had annoyed him with how she had rearranged some of his things, but he was fairly sure he did a few things that might have annoyed her. He certainly remembered to lower the toilet seat after that first time she hadn't noticed. She had been really mad at him for that. When Naruto had been gone and Anko had been either at her own apartment or off on a mission, he found just how lonely his home seemed without either of them. For years he had Naruto there and he got used to not living alone. He had forgotten how it was when he walked through the front door to a quiet home and no one there. It was an empty feeling both in the house and in himself. He found himself missing Naruto there, too excited to see him back, or when Anko had been there already and welcomed him home. He remembered their first night together when Anko had been there at breakfast with both himself and Naruto. Sure, it had taken Naruto by surprise, but the three of them together at the table had seemed right to him. So after all this time thinking, he found that he wanted Anko in his life. He didn't want to lose her. Itachi's image of him torturing her showed him the deeps of his feelings, and after she had told him that she loved him well, he knew what he had to do now. The doctor told him that he needed a day more of rest, but honestly Kakashi couldn't wait that long. He knew he would get chewed out for it, but he'd been chewed out before. All he had to do was just stand there and pretend to listen after all. The nurse wasn't due to arrive until a few hours, plenty of time. Kakashi pushed the sheets away and opened the window. He took a quick look to make sure no one was looking in his direction before making his escape. Hatake home. It had been a long day and Naruto was a little tired. He had fun showing off for Hinata and everyone, plus then they all caught up on what everyone was doing. It was odd how Sasuke hadn't been there, but then again he had never been for groups. But still, it had been a pretty cool afternoon and it was great spending time with Hinata as well. He even managed to ask her if she could meet him tomorrow afternoon. He giggled like his dad sometimes did as Naruto thought of tomorrow. It would be just the two of them and he had an idea to make sure if any Hyuga might be looking out for them. He was about to go looking through the ramen cupboard before he heard a knock on the door. Groaning at how his mealtime would be pushed back, he walked to the front door. It was a good thing he hadn't even had time to pull off his mask yet, he figured. He opened the door and the last thing Naruto expected was to see Sakura standing there. "Hey Naruto, can I come in? There's something that's been bothering me and I want to talk to you about it." Well, okay. He opened the door to let her in as his mind was racing with what could be the problem. It couldn't be one of those girl problems as he liked to think about them. She had Ino for that kind of stuff. She did look a little stressed, nothing major, but her shoulders did seem stiff and it looked like she had something important on her mind. He led her to the living room as she took a chair and he took the couch. So, what's up then? Sakura sighed as he'd been thinking about this problem all the way here. I think there might be something wrong with Sasuke-kun. What do you mean? He blinked, trying to figure out what she meant. Haven't you noticed that he's been kind of distant? How is that any different from normal? He joked. Naruto, I'm being serious here. Slight anger flared up in her. Naruto waved his hands in front of him in defense. Sorry. I couldn't help it, but you know he's usually is distant and kind of moody at times. He's always so serious and stuff, so I never really noticed any change. Which was true, and one of the reasons why he had always tried to prank Sasuke in school. It was fun to get a rise out of him, kind of like with Neji. The serious types were always so easy to push, and how they kept trying to not react he just found hilarious. Like the time when he had used that headhunter technique and pulled Sasuke into the ground while Naruto had read from one of his dad's books. Sure, Naruto had gotten into deep trouble for it, but it had so been worth it. Sakura continued on, well, ever since he heard about his brother being here, he's been even more closed off. I'm a bit worried that he's fixating on Itachi and that, well, I don't know, I'm just starting to worry about him. I was hoping you could come with me to talk, as I figured he might talk to one of us. He had tried earlier herself, but he had evaded that. Something was bothering him and he was doing something unhealthy about it. I was hoping we could see him tomorrow and talk about it. I kind of had a date planned with Hinata-chan, he said, scratching the back of his head. Although Sakura did seem pretty worried, but with his dad in the hospital and showing off for Hinata, he hadn't really been paying attention. Part of him was kicking himself if he had missed something like this. He had been so focused on his own life, had he really just not noticed? Now he was starting to feel a bit guilty if he had. Oh. Sakura looked a little downcast. Well, I won't get in the way of that, so no worries. How about we just ambush him in the morning then? Naruto offered, as this way they could do both, at least he hoped so. If this took all day, he was going to be pissed if it ruined the afternoon. I mean, that way we'll know for sure he should be home and we won't leave until he starts talking. Sakura was thankful that he was up for this. She was starting to worry and wanted to talk to him, but he seemed to have put up a wall ever since he learned about Itachi. Thanks for this, Naruto. He only smiled back at her. Hey, it's no problem, we're all a team, and when someone on the team needs some help, we should be there, right? Right. Suddenly a very noticeable growling was heard from Naruto's stomach as the boy looked a little embarrassed. She smiled at him. I take it you were about to eat, huh? Oh yeah? Naruto scratched the back of his head. You want some? Because I can make more. Instant ramen. She asked, knowing the answer. His look told her that he had nailed it. I'll pass, my mom is cooking and I don't want to keep my parents waiting. She got up to leave, thanking him one more time before going. She hoped that she was just overreacting, but Sasuke's attitude was just giving her a very bad feeling. Anko's apartment. Anko walked through her front door, kicking lightly closed with her heel behind her. She shrugged off her coat and put it on the hook by the door as she sighed and rolled her shoulders. She was slightly sweaty from training. After the dango, she found she needed something else to keep her mind occupied and had just spent a good time putting herself through a long training session. Now she just wanted a nice long bath. Maybe she would go to the hot springs. That was always a good way to relax her body. She went into her bedroom to set out some non-sweaty clothing when she felt a presence behind her. Training kicked in as she pulled a kunai out of her pouch and quickly turned around to place the tip against the neck of whoever snuck into her place. Whoa there, Anko, Kakashi said calmly. Anko's eyes widened. The hell are you doing? You trying to get killed? She sighed and put the weapon away. She couldn't believe he had snuck into her apartment. For a moment she was wondering how he even got in, but given who he was, she bet that the simple locks on her doors and windows wouldn't really stop any real ninja if they wanted to get in. Then she remembered that he had a key to her place. She was starting to regret it when they had exchanged keys now. Wait, she turned to face him as a new thought hit her. Are you out of the hospital now? He gave her an eye smile as he scratched the back of his head. I sort of let myself out. That actually gave her a small laugh that was just like him to sneak out if he wanted to. You now they're going to be pissed that you left. I heard the nurses like to use the very large needles now on patients that cause them trouble. I'll deal with it, he said calmly to her. I wanted to talk to you. About what? Oh, I know, the new Hokage, she said quickly, trying to control the conversation. She knew full well why he was here and she was hoping that if she could control the conversation it wouldn't lead to it. If it could work she would talk until he gave up. It wasn't much of a plan but it was the only plan she had. I mean it's great to have a woman in charge for once, she went on. First female Hokage, I kind of look forward to that. Well I'm sure she'll do great, he said trying to get into the conversation. Oh yeah Kurenai and Asuma are going on a date later too. Yes that's nice wait what? Kakashi wasn't sure he heard that one correctly at first. Anko grinned at him, you should have seen her asking him out it was so cute and funny as hell. You should have been there for it. Well it is about time, Kakashi admitted as he had seen those two dancing around each other. Yeah you think we should double date with them? She asked him moving deeper into her bedroom acting like everything was normal and ignoring the elephant in the room. It might be pretty funny to see what they look like on a date. Anko stop avoiding the subject, Kakashi was getting a little impatient with her now. Avoid what? She asked innocently which was a very good job since she knew full well what he was talking about. You know what? Anko could see he was serious as she signed and went to sit on her bed looking glum. Do we have to? I mean can't we just pretend it didn't happen? Kakashi pulled a chair by a small desk in front of her as he sat down eye to eye with her. I can't do that. Well why not? She asked him nearly exasperated. I mean it was a stupid thing to do and it was kind of a major bomb I dropped on you. I admit I was pretty much taken by surprise, he admitted as at first he hadn't been sure he heard her right. Oh god why do I always screw things like this up? She pleaded into her hands as she rested her face in them. Kakashi was really wondering where all this was coming from until he suddenly got what she might be afraid of. She was afraid that he wouldn't feel the same and that it would be really awkward for them in their relationship. He could see her point of view, he hadn't said those three little words to her because before now he hadn't been sure of their relationship. But he knew what was in his heart now and who was in it. Anko you didn't screw anything up, he pulled off his mask as she leaned in close and pulled her hands away making her look at him. He felt nervous about this, he had never said the words he was going to say to another woman before. He felt his hands getting slightly clammy and his throat was getting dry. He had rehearsed it a lot of times in his head but actually doing it was a lot harder than he thought but she deserved to know how he felt after what she said. I had a lot of time to think about it and I want you to know something Anko. He took a breath. I love you too. Anko stared at him with wide eyes as of course she had the most elegant response ready for him. Wah. Okay well maybe not her finest hour in that regards. He chuckled never having seen her like this totally surprised and caught unprepared. It was kind of funny really but he did his best not to laugh, he knew if he laughed now she would get angry with him. And an angry Anko wasn't pleasant. He did smile at her, I told you that I love you too. Anko blinked before she could speak to him again. You're not just saying that. You know I said it and now you feel that you have to say it in order to not make things weird between us. Because if you are saying just because of that let me tell you that, she never got to finish before Kakashi figured actions would speak louder than words with her. He cupped her face as she kissed her deeply letting all his emotions into the kiss. It took her a moment to respond as her hands reached up to his own head pulling him in for a deeper kiss. Soon she found herself on her back on her bed with Kakashi on top of her as the two were in a passionate kiss that could steal your breath away. Eventually they had to come up for air as Kakashi pulled away looking down at her flushed face. Now do you believe me? Yeah. I guess that would do it. Anko breathed deeply as a part of her felt actually giddy at this. Never would she have thought that this moment in her life would come. She was actually in love, the younger more cynical self would never have believed it, let alone that the man she fell for felt the same. She had never been one for things like romance or relationships. She always felt that was something that happened to others. So she just couldn't figure out how it was that when she hadn't even been trying, she fell into just that. So, what now? Kakashi asked her. Well I was going to take a shower. Yeah I noticed. He grunted when he felt her punch him in the kidney. Sorry. She glared up at him, you know I was going to ask you to help me wash up but if you're going to be an ass about it then maybe you should go back into that lonely hospital bed while I get out of these clothing and wash up on my own. I said I was sorry, Kakashi told her not wanting to go back to the hospital just yet. Plus the image she had just put into his mind really didn't want him to go back. Can't I make it up to you? She paused before grinning. Well, you can start by getting off me and then you can help me out of these clothing. He grinned back at her. I think I can do that. Sasuke's home. It was late and Sasuke had been training for so long he had lost track of time. Currently he was covered in sweat as he was using his sword against a wooden training dummy. It was fully of cuts, more of them had been added in just the last 2 hours. His breathing was deep and ragged, his arms were tired and hurting. He couldn't even hold the sword up anymore, but he still felt that same burning sensation in his soul. Itachi had been here while he was away. His brother who had destroyed his entire clan and family had dared come back here. Itachi had walked right into the village, but it hadn't been to finish what he had started all those years ago. He had come here looking for Naruto of all things. Kakashi had ended up in the hospital and then Itachi had left as easily as he had gotten in. All his life Sasuke felt that this village was a place where Itachi would never come back to. For weeks after the massacre he had been afraid that his older brother would come back to finish him off. But it never came. Deep inside he felt that the walls of this village would keep him safe long enough to train and be better than Itachi. For the day he was ready to go after his brother and finally end this long nightmare once and for all. He dropped to the ground, letting go of his sword. Sasuke felt a lot of emotions lately and he felt like his mind was in the middle of a whirlwind. All his life had been dedicated to bringing his brother down for his crimes, and in the end, Itachi hadn't been interested in Sasuke. All these years, and did he mean nothing to his brother after everything? Sasuke clenched his teeth and balled his fists. That thought really burned him as he felt his pride being trampled on. If Kakashi hadn't been able to beat his brother, then Sasuke saw that he needed to get stronger than even Kakashi. He needed to become a lot stronger, he needed power, as if he fought Itachi now Sasuke knew that he wouldn't win. He grunted out in pain as the curse seal on his neck flared up. His hand clamped onto it as he felt the burning pain. He felt it trying to activate as he forced it back down. He still remembered the rush he felt when it had been activated in the Forest of Death, but he had been warned about it. Although he respected Kakashi's warnings about the curse seal, he needed to be stronger. He needed to be better than he was now, or else he would never come close to beating Itachi. He glared at the training dummy in front of him. He looked at the marks on it and he still felt like he wasn't good enough. He needed to be faster and more accurate. He couldn't get into a dragged-out fight with Itachi. Not only that, Sasuke still haven't fully awakened his eyes. On eye only had 1 mark and the other had 2. Both needed to be at 3 marks to reach their full potential, and he needed to bring that out. All these years, and just when he felt like he was getting closer to his goal, something like this happened to remind him of just how much longer he needed to go. It was like climbing a mountain only to realize that the damn thing kept getting taller. All the work he had put himself through, all the blood, sweat and pain he had put his body through to become a ninja that was capable of defeating his brother now felt like it was a joke. The new jutsu he learned might not be enough. He needed to learn more and train more. He needed power, but could he really use the mark on his neck for it? Sasuke just didn't know anymore. He could feel the pain of the seal finally fading away into nothing. Panting, Sasuke clenched his fists into the soft earth he was on, feeling so helpless and powerless, and he hated that feeling. Getting up after a rest, he picked up his blade as he went into his empty home. It wasn't empty of items, just empty of people. For so long this place had felt empty to him, only the ghosts of the past seemed to roam the halls. There was a time when this place had been full of life, but this house only had him in it now. Some rooms he never even went into anymore just because of how painful they were, and left them to the dust and spiders. He placed the sword on a table and went into his room. It was dark in there as he fell onto his bed. He looked to his left at the nightstand to see a picture of his family. There was the younger him, all smiling and happy with his parents. His mother was beaming while his father looked serious as usual. The image was also torn, as Sasuke had ripped all images of Itachi from any photo he could find. He wanted no reminders of his brother in this house. He didn't want to look at that man's face again. But still, all the damaged photos, the empty feeling of the house, they were all constant reminders of his brother and of that night. Even if he had moved to his own place, it would still be the same. Some days it felt like he never left that night. That his entire life was all just one long night that never ended. Pushing the thoughts aside, he wanted to just sleep. He hardly ever dreamed anymore, or at least he didn't remember if he did. That was fine for him. He fell into the darkness as his tired body gave out on trying to keep awake. In the morning he would train even harder and try see if there was any way he could one day become strong enough to end his long night and maybe finally see the sun rise in his life. Sasuke woke up with the dawn hitting his face as he groaned and turned around as he didn't feel like getting up just yet. Not many knew this, but sometimes he just didn't want to wake up. Sometimes he preferred his dreams, which were rare. He had been dreaming of when he had been younger on a day his parents took him to the park. It was one of the few really happy memories he had of his childhood. Part of him wanted to stay there, but the dawn had pretty much seemed to want to rip him from that time. Reluctantly he got up and signed as he slowly went to the bathroom. He showered and changed as he silently went to the kitchen. That was something he didn't do when he was home, talk. Most people took such a thing for granted, but when you lived alone you never talked. It was a strange thing to miss, but the fact that how silent his life was when he was home only seemed to echo the hollow feel of the house and his personal life here. The house always had this empty and cold feel to it, but then it wasn't like he had much say in that. Sometimes when he sat down at the table, ghosts from the past would haunt his waking world. He would remember the smell of the food his mother would make, her soft voice as she said good morning to them all. His father's presence as he silently ate and read something, his brother there asking him what the plans for today were. Sometimes Sasuke would yearn for those simple days, sometimes he felt his eyes sting with tears threatening to spill out, but they didn't. He had cried a lot when he was younger, when he woke up from his coma to find his life in ruins. He had cried so much he felt that he had cried all the tears he had in this life. He honestly didn't have any more tears to shed anymore. He would look at the empty chairs and for a moment he could almost feel the presence of his family again. But it was gone just as suddenly and he was back again alone. He silently ate his breakfast and then picked up his sword. He would clean it and start training again. There was nothing for him to do with Kakashi still in the hospital, and he hadn't received any summons for missions either. Sometimes he used training as a way to center himself, to throw his whole being into. When he trained he had a goal and he could push all the pain away. His whole world became the training and there wasn't anything other than that. Not far away, two other young genin were walking through the old Uchiha district. Naruto Hatake and Sakura Haruno looked around as they walked the area. Although the massacre had happened years ago, the area seemed to be stained forever by it. They had heard the stories how if you walked down certain streets at night or on the anniversary of that night you could hear the cry of the dying. How ghosts would haunt certain parts of the area. Kids looking for parents that were long dead, lovers dying together by Itachi's blade, and other gruesome tales since there had only been one survivor. Others had eventually bought up the area, stores were opened, houses were moved into by others and live returned, but there was still that uneasy feeling. Only Sasuke's house remained as the last thing of the Uchiha that still stood. All other signs of the Uchiha were long gone. The old clan symbols were removed or painted over by the new owners. This part of the village always seems kind of depressing when I walk through it, Sakura commented. I know it happened a long time ago, but still this place gives off a strange vibe sometimes. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. Really, never really thought about it. Sakura gave him a leveled look. You really are too carefree at times, you know that. Naruto just shrugged again as Sakura scowled at how sometimes he acted a little too much like his father sometimes. They soon found themselves in front of Sasuke's home. There was a high wall that prevented anyone seeing into the place. Many times the girls of the school would come hoping to find a place to look over the wall. There was a large wooden door which was most likely locked. They looked around and didn't see anyone just yet, so now was as good a time as any. Unlike in the school, they knew how to put chakra into their feet and climb the wall with their feet. They quickly ran up and over the wall before jumping down onto the ground on the other side. They walked up to the front door and were about to knock when they heard something coming from outside the house. They decided since Sasuke was the only one that lived here, it was most likely him. They found him slashing at a dummy with his sword, and by the looks of it he had been at it for a bit. Hey, you're dropping your guard too low. Naruto yelled out. Although Sasuke wasn't, it was always fun to make him think that he was doing something wrong. Sasuke jerked to a stop before glaring at Naruto. What are you two doing here? Well, you've been a bit odd lately, but I felt that was normal for you. Naruto joked. That earned him an elbow in the side from Sakura and a glare with it. You've seemed distant since you learned about your brother being here, Sakura told him honestly. We're worried about you. I'm fine now, you can leave. He turned back to the dummy. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Okay, sure, Sasuke could be a bit cold and distant at times, but he was never like that. Looks like there was something to Sakura's worry after all. He had known Sasuke for years and there just seemed to be this darkness hanging over his head and this grim look on in his eyes. Yeah, then how come you've locked yourself up in here? You didn't even show up with everyone at Hinata-chan's place with everyone else. Naruto told him. I've already seen that technique, so why would I want to see it again? Oh yeah, kind of a good point, Naruto muttered to himself. Yeah, well, oh yeah, you could have still gone just to hang out with everyone. I mean, you could have shown off that new move of your own. I bet even Neji would be jealous of that one. He put a little emphasis on Neji's name. If there was one thing he could count on, it was the rivalry between Uchiha and Hyuga. It had to be the fact that the village only had two clans with special eye powers. Sasuke paused as he considered that it would have been nice to show up the Hyuga prodigy, but he had more serious things to worry about. Naruto got the feeling they were being ignored now, and it was kind of starting to piss him off. He didn't have to be the center of attention, well, not all the time, but being ignored was something he never liked. So he decided to switch it up a bit and try and piss him off. Yeah, well, I don't know why you're going to practice so much. Given what happened with my dad, I got plans to kick the crap out of Itachi. As soon as that name slipped out, Sasuke hit the dummy with suck force, the sword embedded into it. Sasuke had to pull hard to get it out as he then turned on Naruto with blazing eyes. He's mine, you will not touch him. Sakura had never seen such hatred in Sasuke's eyes, and she was worried that maybe she should have done the talking. She was about to say something, but Naruto suddenly started walking forward. He got to a few feet away from Sasuke as he looked him right the eye. Make me, Naruto simply said with hard eyes. What? Sasuke said darkly. You heard me, make me. I bet I could beat you, and if I do, I bet that means I'm closer to beating that guy's ass than you are. Sasuke looked at him for a long silent moment as the tension between them started to rise up. He gripped his handle harder as the leather creaked slightly from the grasp. Fine then. And just like that, he came at Naruto. The blonde masked ninja nearly didn't have enough time to pull the short sword from his back to block the attack. He pushed back as he countered, although his sword wasn't as long as Sasuke's, it allowed to make smaller, quicker swipes at him. Sasuke had the range, but the closer Naruto got to him, the harder it was to position his sword just right. Sakura watched in horror as the two went at it. She had seen them spar before, but this wasn't anything like sparing. They were moving way too quickly and the blows were full on without them holding back. She knew enough that if they screwed up with that kind of recklessness, they could get seriously injured, if not worse. Although she was training to be a medic, she didn't want to try to put to use the little knowledge she had. They boys just seemed to focused on their fight that they didn't even seem to notice her. She couldn't let this go on, and if she had to knock some sense into them, she would. She watched them carefully, looking for the perfect moment. Thankfully, she got an opening before something serious happened. Alright, that's enough. Sakura quickly got between them as she used her tonfa to hook behind both their knees and pulled up, sending them both onto their backs. Enough of this male bonding crap with the fighting. Why do boys always end up doing this? She yelled at both of them. She didn't want to see them fighting like this. Why can't you see that we just want to help you? Sakura pleaded with Sasuke. I don't need help, he grumbled, sitting back up. He had been so focused on Naruto that he had forgotten she had been here for a moment. It would figure that she would pick that moment to strike with those weapons of hers. That's crap. Naruto sat up as well. You say that, but what happens if you faced him now? I know I'd lose, but that's why I need to get stronger, Sasuke told them both. I have to revenge what he did, don't you two understand that? He killed everyone in my family and my clan. It's my responsibility to bring him to justice. If there was someone else alive from the clan, they would be doing the same thing. Well, what about me? Naruto asked him. I nearly lost my dad. He's the only family I got, so are you saying that I don't have a beef with your jerk of an older brother? Sasuke looked at him angrily. He's fine now, my family will never be fine again. Naruto wasn't sure if Sasuke was saying that his dad's life meant less than the Uchiha, but this wasn't getting anywhere. He just wanted to show that he didn't have to be alone in all of this, that what affected one of them affected them all. It was that thought that made him suddenly get inspiration for something to tell him. Yeah, well, you're forgetting one thing. Sasuke looked at him silently, waiting to hear whatever he was going to say. Yeah, the Uchiha were your clan, but they were Leaf Ninja, Naruto told him seriously. I mean they were a part of this village too. The entire village felt the pain of that day, not just you. I remember my dad being all depressed on that day. I never really understood until I was older and knew about how he got his eye. Sasuke paused, remembering that story as well. Kakashi always talked proudly of Obito Uchiha, and he had learned a lot about who might have been the most unassuming member of his clan, and yet Kakashi always said that Obito in the end had been one of the greatest ninja the man had ever known. I remember that day too, Sakura spoke up, thinking back. My mom had been good friends with an Uchiha woman. I forget her name, but I remember her always going to my family's shop, and my mom and her would talk all the time. I remember her crying a few nights after it. See, you're not the only one that got hurt from that, Naruto told his friend. They were Leaf Ninja and part of this village, and when they were gone everyone felt the loss. You're not the only one hurt by that, so why should you take all the burden? You think someone else's pain is worth more than yours. You think you're the only one hurting from that day. Plus we're your teammates and friends, Sakura put in as she took a step forward. Kakashi-sensei keeps telling us about teamwork and how we're stronger together than alone. You don't have to carry this burden alone, Sasuke-kun. If you really are going after your brother, then let us help you. Yeah, you can fight for the Uchiha, but let us fight for the village, Naruto told him, crossing his arms. Besides, I bet your jerk of a brother wouldn't expect that, would he? I mean, why the hell should we do what he wants? That right there got Sasuke thinking. He was playing into his brother's hand. Plus they were starting to make a point. The Uchiha were part of the village. Come on, let's go kick his ass together, Naruto said to him. I just want one good hit in for my dad. I promise that you can finish the job. Sasuke didn't say anything, as he was just feeling a lot of confusion. For years he had taken on the burden to bring justice to his older brother for his crimes. He felt that as the only survivor it was up to him to do this. He never once considered help in taking his brother down, because he wasn't sure if anyone was strong enough to go up against his brother. Plus there was another fact, not once in all the years had anyone offered to help. He felt that he was alone in this for so long, it just felt like he had to do it alone. He looked at the masked boy in front of him and the pink-haired girl next to him. Naruto had always been the one that pushed him to do better in the academy, and Sakura was getting stronger all the time. She even was starting some extra training under the Hokage now. Who knew the kinds of things she could learn under her that he couldn't? He didn't know much about medical jutsu or other skills, and he wasn't sure they were skills he could just copy with his Sharingan and hope to use. Despite what most believe the copy abilities had its limits, if he didn't have any kind of affinity with the jutsu it was harder to use, sometimes even impossible if he had no talent at all for a certain element. Physical abilities were also limited to what his body could pull off. Then there was Naruto, the guy had a nearly unnatural knack for surprises. Plus there was no telling what he would learn in a few years, so there he was sitting in his yard with a choice. He could try and do everything on his own and do exactly what his brother wanted, or he could do something surprising. He grunted out and actually gave a small smile. You two are idiots sometimes, you know that. You want to help me take out a guy that killed an entire clan. Hell yeah, Naruto shouted, bumping a fist into the air. Hell, if we do that we'll not only even the score for everyone, but we'll be total badasses. I'm going to be the greatest Hokage in history, and taking down an S-class missing ninja from our village will help in that, you can bet on it. Sakura smiled but rolled her eyes. Who do you think will have to patch you two up afterwards anyway? Seriously, I bet you two will go overboard and won't be able to walk after it, and I'll have to know how to reset everything, so you can bet you'll need me to carry you both back to the village when we're done. Sasuke shook his head and sighed. Fine, if only because I know you two will just follow me and I'll have to look out for you too. Like hell, Naruto crossed his arms. I bet you'll get into more trouble and I'll have to save your ass. Sasuke grunted with a smirk. We'll see on that. The three of them smiled as they made their pact to take down Itachi together. All three of them felt a bit better after this. Sakura smiled to herself, seeing Naruto and Sasuke try and argue over who would be the one to do what in this future fight. It was kind of funny as she couldn't see any real hostility in them, it was just their way of being around the other. Honestly, boys couldn't seem to be honest with their feelings and hide it all behind some kind of macho exterior. Hey Naruto, weren't you going to do something today? She asked him, in case the two decided to challenge the other to a new sparring match. It seemed to be getting that way, and she remembered he had something a bit more important than just trying to beat Sasuke at something. Naruto thought about it before jumping up. Crap. I nearly forgot I got a date with Hinata-chan. I got to get home and change. Sasuke, we'll settle this later. Both of them watched as Naruto bolted for the nearest wall and went over it. He certainly could move fast when he was motivated. Sakura looked down at Sasuke as she smiled and offered her hand to help him up. He paused for only a second before taking it as she pulled him off the ground. So are you still going to train for the day? She asked him. He shrugged, not much else to do at the moment. Okay then, I'm game. She pulled out her tonfas as she put them into a guard position, the long metal parallel with her forearms as she got into a stance Anko trained her to be in. Sasuke was about to say something, but the burning look in her green eyes told him that she was up for it. Before he wouldn't have thought much of her skills, but she had proven herself lately. She had grown into a better ninja, something he could appreciate. He smirked as he got his sword and went into a high guard stance, the blade being held high at head level. I won't go easy on you, he told her. That's odd, I was going to say the same thing, she replied to him, trying to mirror the smirk he had on. One thing that Anko taught her was that it was always make it seem like you were equal or better than the guy in front of you. It was the only way a woman could get respect with some males. She didn't have to wait long as Sasuke rushed forward. Hyuga clan compound. Hinata was in her room getting ready for Naruto. She wasn't sure what he had in mind, but it would be nice to just spend some time with him. It felt like forever that they had any time to themselves. With missions and the village recovering, everyone was busy. But he had promised to set the day aside for just them. So Hinata made sure that her team wasn't going to be sent out on a mission or training that would get in the way. Apparently Kurenai had plans and wanted to give everyone a day off. She wasn't sure what her sensei had planned, but she had seemed slightly happy for some reason. So she had finished with getting her room cleaned up. Her pet rabbit's cage had been cleaned and the rabbit was currently napping. It was nice that Hanabi could help take care of him while she was away on missions and such. Plus she knew that her little sister enjoyed playing with the pet rabbit too. Although currently she was sitting at a simple vanity mirror looking at herself in the mirror, she was wondering if she should try and change into something else. All she had on was her usual pants and coat. She did have other clothing, but she had no idea if Naruto wanted her to look better. It was times like this she wished she had her mother. She would know what to do. There were just some things that a girl couldn't ask her father, and this was in no means something she wanted to talk to him about. She knew that her father didn't hate Naruto or anything, but it was just something very embarrassing to the both of them. She sighed. Maybe she should have tried talking to Kurenai about this. Her sensei was sometimes like her older sister, and she felt that she could go to her with things like this. Hinata sat on her bed looking down. Maybe she should change her coat or go without it. She could go and look for Ino or Sakura. She was close to those girls and could ask for advice, but she had no idea where they might be at this point, and she couldn't spend the time looking for them. Realizing that she had no more time, she decided to just go as she was. Making sure that the rabbit cage was secured, she left her room and closed the door behind her. She felt nervous even though she and Naruto were officials. Sometimes she found it hard to believe that they were actually dating. She wasn't sure what to really do as a couple. She had no real experience and was always afraid she might do something wrong. Hinata knew that she should have more confidence in herself, but that had always been a problem for herself. There was just so much expected of her as the oldest child of the head of the clan, a clan that had a very long legacy to uphold. It was a lot of pressure to be under when she first realized the weight that would be carried on her shoulders. Sometimes it felt that the entire clan expected great things from her simply because of the family she was born into. Hinata. She was brought out of her thinking as she noticed Neji was walking towards her. Ah. Neji-Nisan. Are you okay? He asked her. He was on his way to his own room and noticed her in the hall as she looked to be deep in thought about something. Oh yes, sorry, my mind was wandering. Neji wasn't sure what she was thinking about, but if she didn't want to say anything, that was okay with him, as it could be something personal after all. Although he was wondering if she was up for some more lessons today. She had been improving and Guy was off on a mission until tomorrow. Tenten said she was working on cleaning and maintenance her weapons. Given the number of weapons he had seen, and who knew how many more, that could be a full day's work. As for Lee, well, he wasn't in the mood for some kind of insane training that a normal person might end up in the hospital if they tried. Well, I'm free for the day. If you want to continue some lessons, I will gladly help out. He offered. Oh well, thank you, but I promised I would go on a date with Naruto-kun today. In fact, I have to go now. Very well, I won't keep you. He bowed his head slightly, watching his younger cousin go. Although he didn't mind she had plans, the fact that he was going on a date with Naruto might have been something to worry about. At least he was hoping he would have nothing to worry about as he started to really think hard about Naruto. It wasn't all the long ago that he used to flirt with Tenten. Of course Neji felt he only did that to annoy him, but at least he stopped doing that when he started dating Hinata. Although now it seemed that the Uchiha seemed to take an interest wasn't pleasant either, but Neji put those thoughts aside for another time. Neji also knew that Naruto read those books of his father as well. Neji knew what kind of books those were and he had a fairly good idea on the contents inside of them. There was one other thing, and the rumors about the reasons why Hiashi had chased Naruto out of Hinata's room one night. The fact that the boy had even been alone in her room at night wasn't a pleasant idea. Maybe it would be best to keep an eye on him after all, he thought to himself. He could keep a respectful distance just in case and give them a sort of privacy. After all, Hinata was more like a little sister to him than a cousin. He had always looked after her growing up and he felt it was a duty to make sure that Naruto didn't try anything out of line. Hinata walked through the village going to Naruto's place to meet up with him. She felt both nervous and yet she couldn't wait for this. They hadn't had much time together after they were made ninjas, so when they finally had become a couple they had to find the moments when they could. Walking down the streets she saw everyone doing something. The village always felt full of life, one of the reasons she loved living in the village. She was passing by a side street when suddenly she felt a pair of hands grab her and pull her in. She was about to let out a scream as she felt a hand on her mouth and suddenly there was something behind her pressing against her. She panicked for a moment. Although most didn't know it, she hated being suddenly grabbed by strangers. That night when she had been a child and kidnapped left her with a fear about that happening again. It wasn't as bad as it had been when she was a child, but she still didn't like it. Surprise, Hinata-chan, Naruto's voice whispered into her ear. En Naruto-kun. He pulled away, chuckling at surprising her. He had been traveling the rooftops to try and get ahead of her as he had been worried he was running late, plus he had another reason for taking the rooftops. He wanted to check to see if any other Hyuga were around or seemed to always be keeping a certain distance from her. When he had finally spotted her, he just couldn't help surprising her, so he got ahead and cut into an alley that he knew she would have to pass. She pouted at him, not pleased by the scare. Naruto noticed the look on her face and scratched the back of his head. Ah, sorry, I was just joking, plus I wanted to be sure about something. Now she looked confused about the meaning of that. What do you mean? Just let me check. He edged to the end of the alley and pulled out a small mirror from his vest. He used it to look around the corner for the person he had seen shadowing Hinata. She hadn't thought to look for a tail and it looks like it was Neji. At first Naruto thought Neji was just out, but given that he was keeping a certain distance from her he recognized standard shadowing tactics. He had used the same skills from his dad for years. Yep, I thought as much, Naruto muttered as he also noticed that a Hyuga couple had been also not far away. The same couple that looked to be shopping but not actually buying anything or going into any stores, plus the guy looked like one of the gate guards. Given all the times he passed through the main gates he could place the faces of most of them. So he figured Hinata's father might have had one of the guards, the woman might be the man's wife or another guard, he wasn't sure, just to make sure nothing happened to Hinata, or it was just something the Branch family did normally as a duty. So was Neji part of it, or was he doing this on his own? Again Naruto couldn't tell, but none of that mattered, he planned for this. What is it? Oh, I just have to get rid of some unwanted eyes, he chuckled as he made several shadow clones. Then he had half of them turn into a copy of Hinata. Alright, you guys know the plan. You got it. All of them nodded as they left the alley in both ends at different times and going in different directions. The Hyuga might be able to see in all directions, but if they were focused on a certain pair even they could miss something. So with all the decoys deployed it would be fairly easy to get some alone time with her. Naruto-kun. Hinata questioned why he was doing all of this. Looks like you had a few people following you. What? She was surprised by that and a little shocked. Don't worry, I think they were just keeping an eye on you, then muttered maybe it was to keep an eye on him in case he did anything he shouldn't. Honestly, that whole incident with her in her room that her father walked in on had been a misunderstanding. He had been alone with Hinata plenty of times, of course that had been before they were dating. Well, at least as long as he stayed ahead of everyone he could get some time alone with her. Come on, I got everything ready. Naruto took her hand as he led her through the streets. He made sure that the clones knew what route to take that would lead anyone away from the destination. He led her through the village, taking a few side streets and turns just in case. He never considered himself paranoid, but then you could never be too careful with a group of people that could see through solid objects. Besides, it was kind of fun this way, reminded him of when he was younger and tried to sneak into the Hyuga compound as many times as he could just to test them out. Apparently he had found a few holes in the security. Of course, if he knew now when he knew then he would have kept a few of those secret. Sneaking in was nearly impossible now, so if he wanted a late night visit with her he better have a good reason for the gate guards to let him in. At any rate, now they had some alone time and he was going to enjoy it. There was no telling when the next mission would come from or how long either of them would be on it. So he was going to enjoy the time they had together when they had it. Plus he wanted to make this a really cool date for her, so leading her to the training areas he hoped everything was ready. He had placed a few shadow clones on guard just in case, as he didn't want to leave all that stuff alone. There were animals about as well in the area and he didn't want them picking at the food. Hinata had no idea where he was leading them, but it was kind of exciting, the mystery of it all and what he had planned. They moved through the wooded area of the training fields. The smells of the forest were everywhere. She always loved that about the village, the smells of the forest, especially after a raining morning. She liked to go into the woods. Soon they came to a stop as Naruto looked at her as she noticed that look in his eyes when he was getting an idea. You know, I really want this to be a good surprise, you trust me? She nodded her head as she watched him move behind her. He slowly and gently took the forehead protector from around her neck and placed it over her eyes. She swallowed, getting a little nervous as she felt his hands on the naked bare neck. When his fingers touched it, she felt a shiver run through her that she hadn't even known that part of her was sensitive. When she was perfectly blind, she was wondering when he was going to take her hand to lead her, but she squealed when he suddenly picked her up in his arms. He told her to hold on and she did tightly as he started moving quickly through the forest. She didn't know what was going on or what he had planned, but her heart was racing. He was jumping around, most likely he was using the tree branches to quickly move through the forest. Then they landed and he was on flat ground. She could have used her eyes to see where they were, but she restrained herself. He was trying to make this a surprise and she didn't want to spoil things, plus a part of her did enjoy the feeling of being carried in his arms. She blushed, feeling her whole body feeling warm all of a sudden as she was starting to feel a little lightheaded, but quickly fought it down. She had been trying so hard to not faint so much when she was with him like this. Eventually he set her down as he took off the modified blindfold. Here we are. She found herself in a small clearing. Here there was a blanket all set up and a basket. He had brought her out for a picnic, but it wasn't just any field. There close by was a large patch of sunflowers that were growing. I saw this place and kind of thought about you, Naruto admitted, scratching the back of his head. He had gotten rid of the clones before he showed her where they were. Plus he was glad the clones hadn't seemed to try and sneak a snack from the basket. I wanted to find a really cool place where we could just relax together, sort of a special place all for us. I like it, she told him as she sat down on the blanket. Naruto grinned, happy to hear that she liked the area. If this worked out, when this could be their own little spot where they could meet up in secret. He had found this while exploring the village and it hadn't looked like many if any came this way. So it had been the perfect to him, and Naruto had spent a few days planning it all out, and so far so good. He sat down next to her as he opened the basket and took out the food. That looks really good, Hinata said, eyeing the food. She noticed a few foods she really liked, as most likely Naruto picked them just for her. That kind of thoughtfulness made her happy that he knew her so well and also cared enough to do it for her. In fact, this whole thing had been just for her and she appreciated it a lot. Hope it tastes as good then, he grinned at her, and he hoped it did. Now he knew how to make simple things, especially instant food like the ramen cups he liked to eat. Unfortunately, more complicated dishes were a bit of a challenge to him. So he had to buy the food from a few restaurants and the clones repackaged them to look like they were cooked. Yeah, it was cheating, but honestly he wanted this to turn out really nice, and giving her food poison or indigestion wasn't exactly the best way to go about it. Not after all the planning for this and all the hard work. This was their first major date and he was going to make this a good memory for both of them. Hinata tried a rice ball and liked the small taste of honey found in it. In fact, it tasted kind of like that kind that the one shop near the center of the village sold. She smiled, wondering if he hadn't made the food. She knew that he wasn't that good of a cook, so might have bought it. She didn't mind after all, he seemed to put a lot of effort into all of this. So she wouldn't ask him or call him out on it, because in the end the food didn't really matter. The fact that they were alone and together was the really important thing about all of this, and she was enjoying herself so far. The place was beautiful and she liked the sunflowers. She giggled as they kind of reminded her of Naruto's hair. How it was yellow and stuck out everywhere in little spikes. His head kind of did look like a sunflower. Huh, something funny? He asked her. She shook her head. She didn't want to tell him in case she laughed. The clueless face he made just looked so cute to her in that moment. She watched him shrug and pull down his mask as they started to eat together. She also liked these moments when he pulled down the mask around just for her. She knew that he did it because he idolized his dad Kakashi, but sometimes she wanted to see his full face like when they first met. Then again, only she got to see his full face, so she felt very special that he trusted only her to show it whenever they were alone. To her, she knew that it spoke volumes of how much he trusted her and how close they were when he didn't show anyone outside of his family. Even his teammates didn't get to see his face all the time. They spent the lunch talking about anything that came to mind, usually catching up on what everyone else was doing. They laughed and made jokes. Well, Naruto made most of them, if only because he liked the little laughing she did. It wasn't a full-on laugh, it was more of a quiet giggling, like even her laugh was too shy to come out. Naruto always wondered if he could make her laugh out loud one day and what it would sound like. Eventually they ate all the food and were just finishing up with the last of the drinks. Naruto looked at her and found that once again she was very cute. How had he not noticed it before? Maybe just being his best friend growing up had blinded him to certain things. But looking at her now, he couldn't help but notice her looks these days. As they sat together, as she took her last drink left in her cup, enjoying the moment, when he suddenly leaned closer to her. She felt herself blush a bit but smiled at him as he was inches from her face now. "I ever tell you that you're really cute when you blush?" She shook her head, not trusting her voice at the moment as he grinned at her. "Well, you are, makes me want to do this." He leaned in the last bit as his lips touched her. Her pale eyes widened as she felt their lips touch. Her heart was hammering in her chest as she was frozen at the moment. So many thoughts rushed through her. Should she kiss him back? If so, how much should she? Should she do something or just let him take control? His lips were nice. I really should do something now, but what? I can't move. What do I do? What should I do? It will get awkward if I don't do anything. I have to. Kiss back. I wonder what's for supper. For that last thought, she had no idea why it entered her mind. Even after the date, and she had been laying on her bed staring up at the ceiling thinking about the day, that totally random thought was still strange. So she took action, forcing herself to kiss him back as she moaned slightly as she fell into kiss, her mind starting to go blank as her instincts started to take over for her. Naruto took the initiative as he felt her kissing him back. Her lips were so soft as he leaned into it, making small lingering kisses against her lips as they experimented to see how the other reacted. Soon they were getting into the moment, although Naruto's arm and back was starting to ache from the unnatural angle he was in, but he didn't care. This made it all worth it as he could taste her lips and the light flowery smell from her hair reached his nose too. Hinata felt herself getting faint again as her heart was beating so fast it might burst. She couldn't keep herself propped up anymore and slowly started to fall onto her back. Naruto went with her as she was on top of her, kissing her again. She hadn't known it at first, but her arms snaked around his body as she pulled him in for more. She wasn't thinking anymore. She couldn't think as her mind was lost in a haze of happiness as the two young lovers made out with each other. Naruto thought about something he once read in his dad's books and wanted to try it. He pulled away from her lips and lightly sucked on her ear lobe. Hinata squeaked in surprise at the sudden change and bit her lip, feeling a jolt run through her spine unlike anything she had ever felt before. She thought that the kisses on her lips were something, but this was something totally different, alien and yet very pleasurable for her. She had no idea that her ears were sensitive like this, and with all the things he was doing was opening a whole new world for her. She might never look at ears the same way again after this. She tried to fight it, but a small cute moan escaped her throat. Naruto liked the sound she made and wondered if the next part of the book was right. He moved aside the forehead protector she wore around her neck and kissed the side of the exposed skin. He sucked on the pale and smooth skin lightly before kissing it, trying to emulate what he had read. Hinata's eyes widened even more as she tensed up and actually groaned. The sound was surprising even to her, and she had no idea that she could make such noises. She whimpered as she was torn. Part of her wanted to stop, but another wanted to explore these new experiences, but knowing the kinds of things that might happen if they didn't stop, well, she wasn't ready for it. Wait, she told him, panting for breath now as she felt him stop and pushed himself up so he was looking down at her. I don't think I can take much more, she told him. Well, Naruto knew that they were in no way ready for other things he had read about, but a small part of him did feel a little disappointed. He was starting to have a lot of fun. Her skin was very smooth to him and he wanted to feel more of it, plus the cute little noises she made was something he wanted to hear more of as well. But he didn't want to push her too far too fast. They did have the rest of their lives together after all. He smiled as he lay down next to her. No worries, all you got to do it just tell me to stop and I'll stop. You know that I'll never do anything to hurt you. She turned her head to look at him and smiled. I know, I'm just not ready for certain things. Where did you learn that from? She blushed, remembering all the things he had just done. Oh, I just read about it in my dad's books is all. Oh, she knew about those books, but she never once even thought about reading them. They were for adults and she would never do something as improper as that. Although for the first time she was actually wondering what was in those books. Well, anyways, let's just enjoy ourselves. We got plenty of time before you have to get back, right? She nodded her head as she wanted to try to be a bit more expressive with her own emotions at the moment. Naruto was willing to show her affection, so maybe she should too. With a small inhale of breath, she readied her nerves and rolled over slightly. She was now resting against him, her head on his shoulder as she was blushing all over now. Shutting her eyes as she didn't think she could open them, Naruto was surprised by smiled anyway. He shifted a little as he put his arm around her, feeling her slightly tensed body slowly relaxed. Hinata felt his body against hers and relaxed into it. It felt warm and safe like this. She didn't know it when slowly drifted off to sleep as Naruto watched over her, enjoying the peaceful moment they had together. Konoha Village. Neji had been following Hinata and Naruto for a while now, and honestly he had no idea what they were doing. They just seemed to be looking around and not going in any particular direction. That seemed odd to him as he figured that Naruto was going to do something special for a date with Hinata, or at least something more than just walking around the village together. Plus something seemed off, he just couldn't place his finger on it. Neji was standing by a vendor focused on the couple that he hadn't noticed someone walking up behind him. Tenten was out buying some special oils to use on her weapons that prevent rust build-up. She had a small bag of the metal tin cans as well as a few rags to wipe on and off the oils, and finally she had just gotten a new whetstone she needed for sharpening. Given all the pointed weapons she had, she actually ran through whetstones faster than you'd think. That was when she noticed Neji there and walked over, wondering what he was doing. Neji. She was surprised when he nearly jumped. Normally it was hard to sneak up on him as he usually kept himself very alert. Tenten. I thought you were busy today. She held up the bag. Yeah, I needed a few things, so what are you up to? Neji shifted as he looked to see Naruto and Hinata still in sight, but they were slowly moving away. He didn't want to blow off his teammate, but he couldn't afford to lose track of them either. Tenten gave him a curious look and then noticed his eyes flashing in a certain direction. She looked to see what had his attention when she noticed them. She looked back at him, giving him a leveled look. Please tell me you're not spying on Hinata and Naruto. I'm not spying on them. He crossed his arms, looking slightly offended that he was doing such a thing. I'm just looking after them is all. You're spying on them, she said deadpanned. She wasn't sure if she was more disappointed that he didn't trust them or was curious as to what they were doing. She saw him fidget as the two were slowly getting too far away. She had to admit that she was getting more curious as to what she had missed and what he might have seen. She sighed and rolled her eyes. Well, come on, we're going to lose them if we keep standing here. She told him, walking in the direction. Neji didn't lose step with her, although he did have a curious look on his face. She could see him wanting to question why she was going along with it and decided to tell him before he asked. I'm just curious, she told him. So what have I missed? Some might think of her as not very girly, simply because she took her ninja life seriously, trained a lot and didn't spend her time off chasing down boys or wearing dresses and makeup, but that didn't mean she wasn't a girl. She actually liked romance and she liked being complimented and being chased by good-looking boys just like any other girl her age. And where there was something very interesting like a couple she knew on a date, she had to know how it went, even if she could only so far live vicariously through her friends. Nothing of note, Neji shrugged. They've been looking around stores mainly. Tenten looked at him and then quickly back to the couple. Honestly, I thought on a date you'd, well you know, things like going out to dinner or walking in the park or something, but window shopping, really. Neji just shrugged. He didn't know what others did on dates, but Tenten seemed to have a better idea. Had she been on a date before now? He knew that Naruto used to flirt with her when he was around but had stopped, plus if he had gone out with Tenten he would know. Then he remembered how the Uchiha had been around her lately. The thought of him and Tenten didn't sit well with him as he started to wonder. Have you been on a date before? He asked, trying hard not to blush but failing while keeping his eyes forward. Tenten paused as she blushed, as felt like maybe she had said too much. She fidgeted as she was thinking on answering him with the truth or not, but she didn't want to lie about something like that. Yes, it was embarrassing, but she trusted him enough with it. Well, no, she wished though, why couldn't a nice guy come up and ask her out? Sure, she wasn't super girly, but she had her charms, she felt. He gave her a look. Oh, you sounded like you had experience. Well, it's the basics. She crossed her arms, being mindful of her bags, looking away from him. Just because no one's asked me yet doesn't mean I wouldn't like to go out with a nice guy. That gave him thought that she did want to date. This was the first he ever heard about it from her. Then again, given their other two teammates, where was the time for such talk? Looking at her, he couldn't help but feel that she did have her charms. She was a lot more focused and mature than other girls their own age, something he liked about her. Plus she had a grace about her. She could fight dirty, and yet he had seen her fight with weapons like a dancer. Tenten caught him starting and felt her face heat up. What are you looking at? Nothing, sorry. He went back to looking at the couple, feeling his face heating up. For the next few moments there was a bit of a tense silence between them. Both of them unsure what to say or do next, so they focused on the task at hand. That was when Tenten started to notice a few odd things, mainly that the two members were just hanging out more like friends than a couple. She kept noticing little things. In fact, something really did seem off about the whole thing. Hasn't Hinata usually been a lot more nervous around people? Tenten suddenly asked him. I mean, she looks calmer than I can ever remember seeing her. That was it, Neji realized suddenly. Their actions were totally off. Naruto would be trying to get closer to her and she would be blushing as she accepted. They would at least be holding hands, but they were side by side, as if they were just two buddies out for the day hanging out. Not only that, but as he really looked closer, he suddenly realized that Hinata was all wrong. It looked like her, but she didn't move like Hinata. She moved with a more lumbering way. As a Hyuga trained in their specific fighting style, it gave you a sense of poise and grace. Not only that, but as the eldest daughter of the main house, she would have been trained for years on how to walk, how to keep her back straight, and yet none of that was seen. She didn't move or act like Hinata, and he knew the girl very well. She and Hanabi were more like little sisters to him than cousins, so it was no wonder that something had been nagging at him. Quickly he walked forward as Tenten, startled, matched his pace, quickly asking him what was going on, but he wasn't answering. Soon he came upon the two of them, and the two looked at Neji. Oh hey there, Neji, Naruto spoke up and then noticed Tenten. Are you guys on a date? Both young teens blushed, but Neji ignored it as he stepped up to Hinata and looked at her very closely. Is something the matter? Hinata asked. Neji frowned, looking at her. Now she sounded like Hinata but didn't talk like her. She was nervous, but it wasn't the shy nervous that she usually had. This was something totally different. That was then he realized what must have been going on. Suddenly he punched the fake in the chest as she burst into smoke. What the hell? Tenten shouted out, surprised by his actions. Oh crap, Naruto muttered. Neji turned to Naruto, glaring. Shadow clones with one in a henge. Where are they really? Hey, figured me out, huh? Naruto grinned. Well, you're too late. The boss and Hinata-chan are way gone by now, so good luck finding them. With that, the clone released himself as he too turned into a puff of smoke. Leaving a very frustrated Neji behind. He had been fooled, and he can bet that Naruto wouldn't have just make one fake couple. There was no telling where the real ones could be in the village by now. All this time Naruto had been leading him around like a fool. He swore the next time he found Naruto he was going to have some words with him, maybe by using his fists for all the punctuations. Well, at least we know why they were acting so odd. Tenten spoke up, surprised by it all. He didn't say anything and she could tell he was very annoyed either by being duped by Naruto or by not knowing where they were or what they were doing. Honestly, he could be a little overprotective at times. Although she might have to calm him down or else he looked like he might go and hunt down Naruto by this point. She knew she had to do something, so even though she was slightly embarrassed she slipped an arm through his, leading him away. The sudden contact snapped him out of his thoughts of retribution as Tenten pulled him away. Tenten. I'm hungry and I was going to get some lunch, but since I was watching those two with you I'm really starting to get hungry now. She wasn't lying, she was starting to get hungry and it was the perfect excuse to get his mind off things. She didn't notice how it looked to others at first, her arm around Neji's and her carrying a shopping bag. It looked like they had been out on a date already. Neji felt a little uncomfortable with such intimate contact. It also didn't help that his arm kept brushing up against a certain part of her chest lightly, which made it all too painful how much of a girl Tenten really was. Of course he knew she was a girl, but the physical reminder wasn't helping him stay calm. He started sweating slightly as his thoughts were more on her and less on Naruto. So given that we can't find them, we might as well eat, she told him, feeling herself getting warm feeling him against her like this. She knew that she was just trying to distract him, but she couldn't help but the feeling of him on her arm felt nice. It wasn't like when they were on missions or training, this felt different than any time they were physically touching in the past. This felt more intimate with him as they walked through the village. Well, I suppose I do feel a little hungry myself. Neji had no idea what to say, so he just went with the first thing in his head. Good, I know a good place where we can eat then. She saw a few people looking at them. A few women pointed and giggled as she realized how it finally looked to everyone. Suddenly she felt her race picking up a little as she realized that without even trying she had in a way gotten a date with Neji. Sure, it wasn't a real one, but some part of her felt happy about it. She had been saying earlier that she would at least like to go on a date, but she hadn't thought that it would happen so fast. At any rate, she had no idea how long or if ever something like this was going to happen again, so she was going to enjoy it as much as she could. That will be it for this video. If you want more, comment down below, like, subscribe. And see you guys later.